Some moments are etched in acid, burning into your memory forever. For Amara Jones, that moment was a phone call on a Tuesday afternoon. It was a call from her billionaire employer, Harrison Davenport, a man who usually only spoke to her through his house manager. This time he spoke to her directly, his voice slick with scotch and amusement, inviting her, his maid, to the most exclusive charity gala of the year. He called it a gesture of generosity, but through the phone she could hear the snickers of his friends in the background. She knew what it really was, a joke, a cruel, elaborate prank designed to humiliate her. What he didn't know was that Amara wasn't just a maid, and when she walked through those ballroom doors, she wouldn't be the punchline. She would be the reckoning. The Davenport penthouse was less a home and more a monument to its own existence. Perched atop the tallest residential tower in the city, its floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic, godlike view of the world below. A world that, for all intents and purposes, belonged to Harrison Davenport. The air inside was different, filtered and temperature-controlled, smelling faintly of ozone and expensive, nameless cologne. It was a sterile paradise of white marble, polished chrome, and glass so clean it seemed to melt into the sky. For Amara Jones, this sterile paradise was her workplace. 6 days a week, she moved through the vast, silent rooms like a ghost, her presence marked only by the gradual imposition of order. A perfectly plumped cushion, a streak-free pane of glass, a fingerprint erased from a steel surface. She was 24, though the weight of her responsibilities often made her feel twice that age. Her hands, calloused from cleaning solutions and hard work, were the same hands that, late at night in her cramped apartment, would delicately turn the pages of art history textbooks, her mind a world away in the Uffizi Gallery or the halls of the Louvre. She was pursuing her master's degree online, a slow, expensive crawl towards a dream that felt more distant with every bill that landed in her mailbox. Her mother's mounting medical expenses after a debilitating car accident had derailed Amara's original plan of attending a prestigious university on a scholarship. Life had demanded a detour, and that detour had led her here, to the silent, opulent cage of Harrison Davenport. Harrison himself was a man forged in the crucible of immense, inherited wealth. At 42, he possessed a sharp jawline that was beginning to soften, and eyes the color of a stormy sea that held a perpetual glint of boredom. He ran Davenport Innovations, a tech empire he'd inherited from his father, and expanded with a ruthless, almost predatory acumen. He was recently divorced, a fact the society pages had feasted on for months, and now seemed to fill the void with short-term acquisitions. Companies, cars, and women, all of them sleek and disposable. His interactions with Amara were minimal and transactional. He rarely looked her in the eye, addressing his needs to the air in front of him, as if speaking to a disembodied function rather than a person. "The study needs a deep clean," he'd murmur as he passed, or "have the dry cleaning ready by 5. To him, she was part of the seamless machinery of his life, a cog as inanimate as the dishwasher or the automated blinds. He knew her name was Amara, but he had never truly seen her. He saw the uniform, a simple black polo and black trousers. He saw a service, not a soul. This particular Tuesday began like any other. Amara was meticulously polishing the black granite countertop of the kitchen island, her reflection a distorted figure in its mirror-like surface. Harrison was in his home office, the low rumble of his voice audible from down the hall. He was on a conference call, his tone sharp and dismissive. Later that afternoon, the tone changed. Laughter, loud and boisterous, echoed from the living area. Harrison was entertaining. Amara recognized the booming laugh of Blake Sterling, a real estate mogul with a notoriously vicious sense of humor, and the shrill, bird-like giggles of Isabella Dubois. Isabella was the daughter of a French shipping tycoon, a woman who wore her pedigree like armor and whose smile never quite reached her cold, calculating eyes. She had been a constant presence in the penthouse since Harrison's divorce, circling him like a shark sensing blood in the water. Amara kept to her duties, her movements quiet and efficient, hoping to remain invisible. She was refilling a vase in the grand foyer when Isabella's voice slithered out, dripping with condescension. "Harrison, darling," she purred, "you simply must ensure everyone of note is at the gala on Saturday. It's for the Children's Hospital Foundation. Image is everything. Blake Sterling chimed in. Speaking of which, who are you taking, Harry? Don't tell me you're going stag again. Makes you look lonely. Harrison let out a short, humorless laugh. I have options, Blake. I'm just weighing them. His eyes, Amara noticed from the corner of her vision, flickered past her for a fraction of a second. A cruel, reptilian idea was forming behind them. You know, Harrison said, his voice taking on a performative, theatrical quality, I'm tired of the usual crowd. The same faces, the same shallow conversations. I feel like doing something different this year. Something charitable, you might say. Isabella leaned in, intrigued. What do you mean, darling? Harrison stood up and walked slowly toward the foyer, his expensive leather shoes making no sound on the plush rug. He stopped a few feet from Amara, who kept her eyes fixed on the white lily she was arranging. Her heart began to beat a little faster. She could feel the weight of their collective gaze on her back. I was thinking of extending an invitation to someone truly deserving, he announced, a smirk playing on his lips. Someone who has never experienced anything like the Davenport Gala, a real Cinderella story. He paused for dramatic effect, letting the silence hang in the air before turning his head slightly. Amara? The name dropped into the silent room like a stone. Amara froze, her fingers still clutching the stem of the lily. She could hear Blake stifle a snort, and Isabella let out a gasp that was half shock, half delighted cruelty. Slowly, Amara turned to face him. Harrison was looking directly at her now, a wide, predatory grin on his face. It was the first time he had made such direct, prolonged eye contact with her, and it felt like a violation. The Davenport Charity Gala is this Saturday, he said, his voice loud enough for his audience in the other room. It's a black tie affair, the most important event of the season. I would be honored if you would be my guest. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken mockery. It was a joke, a pathetic, mean-spirited joke designed to make his friends laugh and to remind her of her place. She was the prop for his little performance. She was supposed to stammer, to blush, to either politely decline or, even more pathetically, accept with wide-eyed gratitude, confirming her status as the simple-minded, starstruck maid. Her mind raced. Every instinct screamed at her to quit on the spot, to throw the lily at his smug face and walk out forever. But then she saw it, the look in Isabella's eyes. It was pure, unadulterated contempt, a triumphant sneer that said, "Look at this pathetic creature being played with by a king." And in that instant, something inside Amara shifted. The humiliation that had been rising in her throat like bile suddenly cooled into a hard, dense ball of resolve. They expected her to break. They expected her to cower. They had written her entire script for her. She would not play her part. She straightened her spine, lifting her chin. She met Harrison's gaze. Her own eyes, which he had never bothered to notice, were a deep, intelligent brown, becoming clear and steady. She gave him a small, enigmatic smile. "Why, thank you, Mr. Davenport," she said, her voice perfectly even, betraying none of the turmoil inside. "I would be delighted to attend." The grin on Harrison's face faltered for a second, a flicker of surprise crossing his features before he recovered. He had expected a different reaction. Blake's chuckles died in his throat. Even Isabella looked momentarily thrown. Amara turned back to her boss. "Now, if you'll excuse me," she said calmly, "I have to finish my work. I wouldn't want the penthouse to be anything less than perfect." With steady hands, she placed the final lily into the arrangement, creating a perfect, elegant spray. She then picked up her cleaning caddy and walked away, her back straight, leaving Harrison Davenport and his guests standing in a stunned, uncertain silence. The joke had been told, but for the first time, Harrison wasn't entirely sure who the punchline was supposed to be. The moment the penthouse door clicked shut behind her, Amara's composure shattered. The long subway ride home was a blur of roaring trains and anonymous faces. The calm, defiant woman who had accepted Harrison's invitation evaporated, replaced by a storm of fury and shame. Her hands trembled, and she had to bite her lip to keep a sob from escaping. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. It wasn't just an insult. It was a public declaration of her insignificance. He hadn't just invited his maid, he had invited his property to a party, a curiosity to be gawked at by his gilded circle. She burst into her small two-bedroom apartment, a space that felt like a world away from the sterile expanse of the Davenport penthouse. It was filled with the scent of her mother's favorite lavender air freshener and the clutter of a life lived on a budget. Books were stacked on every available surface, a testament to her deferred dream. Her mother, Sarah, was in her favorite armchair, a thick Afghan over her legs, her wheelchair parked beside her. The accident had taken the use of her legs, but it had not touched the warmth in her eyes. "Amara? Honey, what is it? You look like you've seen a ghost." Amara sank onto the worn sofa, the story tumbling out of her in a torrent of pained words. The laughter, Isabella's sneer, Harrison's smug, performative generosity. "He wants to make a spectacle of me, Mom. He wants me to show up in some cheap, ill-fitting dress so he and his horrible friends can laugh, so they can point and say, 'Look at the little maid, trying to play dress up.'" Sarah listened, her expression shifting from concern to a quiet, simmering anger. When Amara finished, her mother reached out and took her hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "So you're not going then?" It was a statement, not a question. "You'll quit. We'll manage. We always do." "I want to," Amara whispered, tears finally welling in her eyes. "God, I want to walk in there tomorrow and tell him to take his job and his fake invitation and shove it. But when I looked at them, at that woman, Isabella, I couldn't give them the satisfaction of knowing they'd broken me." She looked up, her jaw tightening. "I told him yes." Sarah was silent for a long moment. "Then you cannot go as a lamb to the slaughter, my love," she said softly, her voice firm. "If you walk into that room, you walk in as a lioness. You do not go there to be his guest. You go there for yourself." The next evening, Amara shared the story with Maria, the head housekeeper at a neighboring luxury building, and a friend of her mother's for over 20 years. Maria was a stout, no-nonsense woman from Portugal, with a heart of gold and a spine of steel. They sat in Maria's kitchen, a warm, fragrant room that always smelled of garlic and baking bread. "That filho deu uma cadela," Maria spat, slamming a coffee mug on the table. "That's what these men do. They think because they pay you, they own you. They think your dignity is for sale." She looked at Amara, her dark eyes sharp. "Your mother is right. You cannot back down now. To decline is to admit defeat. To not show up is to prove him right, that you were too scared, too poor, too small to enter his world." "But how, Maria?" Amara's voice was heavy with despair. "The ticket to that gala probably cost more than our rent. The dresses those women wear are couture. They're draped in diamonds. I have my graduation dress from community college and about $200 in my savings account after paying the rent and Mom's physical therapy bills." Maria took a sip of her coffee, her brow furrowed in thought. "Resources, mina querida. You think these rich women are born beautiful? No, they are constructed. They have teams. We must build your team." The plan began to form, not in a flurry of magic, but in a series of practical, determined steps. The mission was clear. Amara would not just attend the gala, she would conquer it. This was no longer about surviving an evening, it was about staging a coup. The first objective was the dress. A new designer gown was impossible. Maria, who knew the city's underbelly of thrift stores and vintage shops like the back of her hand, had an idea. "There is a place," she said, her eyes gleaming. "A vintage consignment shop on the Lower East Side. Echoes of style. Rich women discard last season's gowns there for a pittance. Gowns that have been worn once and then forgotten." The next day, their day off, they went to the shop. It was a treasure trove, a graveyard of forgotten glamour. Racks overflowed with silk, satin, and sequins. Amara felt out of place, her simple jeans and t-shirt a stark contrast to the opulence around her. After an hour of searching, Maria let out a triumphant gasp. She pulled out a dress bag and unzipped it. The gown inside was stunning. It wasn't flashy or covered in sequins. It was a masterpiece of understated elegance, a floor-length sheath of deep, sapphire blue silk that seemed to drink the light. It had a high, graceful neckline and a daringly low-cut back, structured with the kind of tailoring that was timeless. It was a gown that relied on the wearer's confidence, not on adornment. It's a vintage Halston, the shop owner, a chic older woman named Patricia, informed them, from the late 70s, a true classic. The price tag was $400. It might as well have been $1 million. Amara's face fell. I can't, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Maria looked at Amara, then at the dress. She pulled a worn leather wallet from her purse and took out 4 crisp $100 bills. No, we can, she said, pressing the money into Amara's hand before she could protest. This is not a gift. This is an investment. In you. Amara tried it on. The moment the silk slid over her skin, something changed. The reflection in the dusty mirror was not Amara the maid. It was someone else. Someone powerful. The dress fit her as if it had been made for her, hugging her curves and accentuating her tall, slender frame. Her years of physical work had given her a toned, strong physique that the dress showcased beautifully. The next piece of the puzzle was hair and makeup. Maria's niece Sophia was a beauty school student, a fiery young artist with a flair for the dramatic. A goddess? Sophia had said when Maria explained the situation. Oh, I can do a goddess. On Saturday evening, Amara's small apartment was transformed into a bustling command center. Maria directed traffic. Sarah offered advice from her chair. Sophia worked with the intense focus of a painter before a canvas. No smoky eyes, Sophia declared, waving her brushes. That's what they'll expect. We're going for clean, luminous, and powerful, skin like glass, a bold, deep red lip, and eyes that say, I own every room I walk into. She swept Amara's thick, dark hair up into a sophisticated chignon at the nape of her neck, leaving a few tendrils to frame her face. It was a style that highlighted her long, elegant neck and the dramatic cut of the dress's back. For jewelry, there were no diamonds. Sarah provided the finishing touch. From a small velvet-lined box, she took out a pair of earrings. They were her grandmother's, simple, elegant teardrops of polished silver and moonstone. They weren't expensive, but they held the weight of generations of strong women. Your armor, Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion as she helped Amara put them on. Finally, at 8 o'clock, it was time. Amara stood before the full-length mirror leaning against her bedroom wall. The transformation was absolute. The woman staring back was a stranger, an ethereal vision in sapphire blue. The dress, the hair, the makeup. They were the frame, but the picture inside was a new version of herself. Her posture was different, her chin was high, and her eyes held a calm, unshakable fire. The shy, studious girl and the invisible maid were gone. In their place stood a queen. Maria had arranged for a car service, a clean, black town car, another investment. As Amara walked out of the apartment building, the driver, a kind-faced man named George, held the door open and let out a low whistle. Ma'am, he said, tipping his cap, you look like you're heading to the Oscars. As the car pulled away from the curb, heading from her world of brick and pavement towards Harrison's world of marble and glass, Amara took a deep breath. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach. But it was now overshadowed by a powerful, exhilarating sense of purpose. Harrison Davenport had invited his maid as a joke. He had no idea he was about to open his door to a goddess. The Davenport Charity Gala was being held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, a location Harrison had secured through a donation so large it had its own plaque in the modern wing. The entrance was a chaotic ballet of flashing cameras, screaming reporters, and the hushed purr of luxury cars depositing the city's elite onto the red carpet. Women in gowns that cost more than a teacher's annual salary dripped with jewels, their smiles bright and brittle for the paparazzi. Men in impeccably tailored tuxedos exuded an aura of casual power, shaking hands and closing deals amidst the polite cacophony. Amara's town car pulled up to the curb, a modest black sedan in a sea of Rolls-Royces and Bentleys. For a moment, she was invisible, the photographer's lenses aimed at a tech billionaire disembarking just ahead of her. This brief anonymity gave her a final moment to steady her nerves. She smoothed down the silk of her gown, her fingers tracing the cool moonstone of her earring. You are not here for them, she told herself, her mother's words echoing in her mind. You are here for you. Then George, the driver, came around and opened her door. As she stepped out of the car, a strange thing happened. The light from a dozen camera flashes, refracting off the car ahead, caught the deep sapphire of her dress. The fabric seemed to ignite, turning from a dark blue to a brilliant incandescent cobalt. The sudden blaze of color drew the eye of a lone photographer, his attention momentarily diverted. He snapped a picture. The flash from his camera caused another photographer to turn, and then another. It was like a chain reaction. Within seconds, a ripple of confusion and curiosity went through the press line. Who was she? She wasn't a movie star, a CEO's wife, or a famous heiress. They didn't know her name, but they recognized beauty and presence when they saw it. She moved with an unhurried, liquid grace, her posture perfect, her expression serene and unreadable. She wasn't posing or preening, she simply was. The enigma of her identity made her more compelling than the familiar faces. "Who is that?" A reporter from a major fashion blog whispered loudly. "Look at that gown! Is that vintage Halston?" Amara walked the red carpet not as someone braving a gauntlet, but as someone taking a leisurely stroll through her own garden. She didn't look at the cameras. She looked straight ahead, her eyes fixed on the grand columned entrance of the museum. This simple act of ignoring them drove the photographers into a frenzy. They wanted her to look, to give them the shot. Her refusal was a power move, and they respected it even as it frustrated them. Inside, the Great Hall had been transformed. Thousands of white orchids seemed to float in the air, suspended by invisible wires. A string quartet played softly from a balcony, their music a delicate counterpoint to the hum of 1,000 conversations. Waitstaff moved through the crowd with trays of champagne and impossibly intricate hors d'oeuvres. Harrison Davenport stood near the main staircase, holding court. He was flanked by Blake Sterling and an exquisitely dressed Isabella Dubois, who was clinging to his arm. He was telling an amusing anecdote, his audience laughing on cue. Every few seconds, his eyes would dart toward the entrance, a small, cruel smirk on his face. He was waiting for his punchline to arrive. He imagined Amara shuffling in, wide-eyed and terrified, in some pathetic homemade dress, a smudge of dirt still on her cheek. He had already prepared the line he would use. "Ah, there she is. See, Isabella, I told you I believe in giving back." Isabella was practically vibrating with anticipation. "I still can't believe you did it," she whispered to Harrison, her voice giddy. "It's deliciously wicked. Where is she? I need to see her face." Just then, a hush fell over the small section of the crowd nearest the entrance. Heads began to turn. The wave of silence and whispers moved through the hall like a ripple in a pond. Harrison, annoyed at the interruption, turned to see what the commotion was about. He saw her. For a full 10 seconds, his brain failed to make the connection. He saw a woman of breathtaking elegance, a vision in sapphire blue, her skin luminous under the grand chandeliers, her dark hair swept up to reveal the stunning line of her neck and shoulders. She carried herself with the poise of royalty, her gaze calm and assessing as she took in the scene. He felt an immediate primal pull, an admiration for her beauty and a pang of something he couldn't name. He instinctively straightened his tie. "My God," Blake muttered beside him. "Who is that?" Isabella's painted smile froze on her face. Her grip on Harrison's arm tightened, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the fabric of his jacket. "Who is she?" she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "She's nobody. She must be a new actress or something." But there was panic in her eyes. The woman was a threat. And then, Amara turned her head slightly, and the light caught the planes of her face. Harrison's world tilted on its axis. The blood drained from his face, replaced by a hot, disbelieving flush. It was her. It was Amara, his maid. It was impossible. It made no sense. This was not the quiet, invisible girl who scrubbed his floors. This was not the punchline. This was a masterpiece. He had intended to display a crude charcoal sketch, and instead a living, breathing Rembrandt had walked into his party. The joke had inverted itself with a terrifying, beautiful force. He was the one who looked like a fool, standing there with his jaw practically on the floor. Amara's eyes swept across the room and, for a brief, electrifying moment, they met his. There was no fear in them, no awe, no gratitude. There was nothing but cool, calm recognition. She gave him the slightest of nods, a gesture one gives to an equal, before her gaze moved on. dismissing him. That single dismissive nod struck him harder than any insult. He had wanted to put her in her place, and instead, she had effortlessly put him in his. The spell was broken by Isabella's sharp intake of breath. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. "It can't be. It's the help." The word help hung in the air between them, suddenly sounding crass and ridiculous. Blake Sterling let out a low, appreciative whistle. "Well, Harry," he said, a slow, impressed grin spreading across his face. "You certainly have a knack for picking them. I had no idea your charity case would be a goddess." Harrison didn't answer. He couldn't. He was too busy watching Amara as she gracefully accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. She held the flute as if she'd been born with it in her hand. She took a small, deliberate sip, her eyes scanning the magnificent architecture of the hall, a small, genuine smile of appreciation on her lips. She was not intimidated by the grandeur. She was absorbing it, analyzing it, appreciating it with a depth he suspected no one else in the room possessed. The trap he had so carefully laid for her had snapped shut, but he was the one caught inside. And from across the grand hall, his beautiful, enigmatic guest didn't even seem to notice. She was already captivating his world, and she hadn't said a single word. The initial shockwave of Amara's arrival began to subside, replaced by a feverish buzz of speculation. People who had never given her a second glance in the hallways of the Davenport building were now craning their necks to get a better look. Whispers followed her as she moved deeper into the room. "She came with Harrison Davenport, I heard." "Davenport? I thought he was with Isabella Dubois." "Well, look at her. Can you blame him?" "She's a model, surely. Look at that bone structure." Amara was acutely aware of the whispers, the stares. The fear she had suppressed earlier tried to claw its way back up, but she pushed it down. She focused on her art history lessons. She wasn't just in a crowded room. She was in the Egyptian wing of the Met, temporarily repurposed for the gala. She let her gaze wander over the hieroglyph-covered sarcophagi and the massive statues of pharaohs, finding a strange comfort in their silent, ancient permanence. They had witnessed millennia. They were unimpressed by the fleeting drama of New York high society. Her quiet contemplation was shattered by a voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Well, well, well, look what we have here." Isabella Dubois stood before her, a champagne flute held like a weapon in her hand. Her smile was a slash of red lipstick, tight and predatory. Harrison and Blake hovered a few feet behind, a captive audience. "I must say," Isabella continued, her voice loud enough for those nearby to hear, "it's quite a transformation. You clean up nicely. For the help." The intended insult landed, and a few people nearby tittered nervously. This was the confrontation everyone had been waiting for. Amara felt a flash of heat in her cheeks, but she remembered Maria's advice. Do not use their weapons. Use your own. Amara turned to face Isabella fully. She didn't rise to the bait. Instead, she offered a small, polite smile. "Isabella, isn't it? It's a pleasure to see you outside of Mr. Davenport's living room." Her tone was pleasant, but the words subtly repositioned Isabella as just another piece of furniture in Harrison's life. She then let her eyes drift to the large, ornate pectoral necklace Isabella was wearing, a gaudy explosion of gold and turquoise. "That's a fascinating piece you're wearing," Amara said, her voice filled with genuine academic curiosity. "It's clearly trying to evoke the style of the Middle Kingdom, perhaps the pectoral of Senusret too, but the craftsmanship is a bit anachronistic. The setting of the stones feels more Art Deco than 12th Dynasty, a bold if historically confused choice." A stunned silence fell over their little group. Isabella's jaw went slack. She had no idea what to say. She had chosen the necklace because it was expensive, not because of its historical context. Amara hadn't been insulted. She had delivered a calm, devastatingly precise art critique, exposing Isabella's choice as nothing more than a shallow, ignorant display of wealth. Blake Sterling let out an audible cough to cover a laugh. Harrison's expression was a mask of confusion and a strange, burgeoning respect. Before Isabella could recover, a new voice joined the conversation. A man Amara hadn't noticed before stepped forward. He was younger than Harrison, perhaps in his early 30s, with kind, intelligent eyes and a relaxed confidence that didn't feel manufactured. He wasn't as classically handsome as Harrison, but he possessed a warmth that was far more magnetic. "She's absolutely right," the man said, smiling at Amara. "It's a common mistake in modern reproductions. They prioritize flash over fidelity." He extended a hand to her. "Ethan Cole, I apologize for interrupting, but I couldn't help but overhear. It's rare to find someone at an event like this who actually looks at the art on the walls." Amara shook his hand. His grip was firm and warm. "Amara Jones, it's a privilege to be surrounded by it." Harrison, seeing his carefully orchestrated drama being hijacked, finally stepped forward, attempting to reclaim control. He draped a possessive arm around Amara's shoulders. "Ethan, I see you've met my guest," he said, his voice a little too loud. "Amara is full of surprises. A protege of mine, you might say." The word protege was so laughably false that Amara almost flinched, but she kept her composure. The weight of Harrison's arm felt heavy, proprietary. Ethan Cole's smile didn't falter, but his eyes, when they met Harrison's, held a new competitive glint. "Is that so, Harrison? I'm not surprised. Someone with Ms. Jones's keen eye clearly has a bright future." He turned his attention back to Amara, effectively shutting Harrison out of the conversation. "Are you a student of art history, Ms. Jones?" "I am," Amara replied, subtly shrugging out from under Harrison's arm to create a space between them. "I'm working on my master's. My family's foundation, the Cole Arts Initiative, offers several grants and internships for graduate students," Ethan said smoothly. "Perhaps you'd let me give you my card. I'd be very interested to hear about your thesis." The offer hung in the air, a lifeline and a challenge all at once. It was a legitimate professional opportunity offered by a man who saw her intelligence, not just her appearance. It was also a direct shot at Harrison, a clear signal that Ethan Cole was not only unimpressed by Harrison's power play, but was actively working to undermine it. Harrison's face darkened. Ethan Cole was his biggest rival in the tech space. Cole's company, Nexus Dynamics, was younger, more innovative, and rapidly gaining market share on Davenport innovations. Their rivalry was personal and legendary, and now here was Ethan, in the middle of Harrison's own party, attempting to poach the woman who was supposed to be his public spectacle. "That's very generous of you, Ethan," Harrison said through gritted teeth, "but Amara is quite taken care of." It was at that moment, as the three of them stood in a silent standoff, that Amara's focus sharpened. The tension between the two men was palpable, thick with ego and competition. Harrison, desperate to assert his dominance, leaned in closer to Blake Sterling. "Don't worry about him," Harrison muttered, thinking he was speaking quietly, but his voice was tight with anger and carried further than he intended. "He's all talk. While he's busy funding art students, I'm closing the biogenicist acquisition. He won't even see it coming. The board thinks we're still in due diligence, but the preliminary hostile bid goes out Monday morning. We'll gut their R&D department and absorb their patents before he even finishes his first cup of coffee." The words sliced through the ambient noise of the party and struck Amara with the force of a physical blow. Biogenicist. She knew that name. Her mother's physical therapist, Dr. Anya Sharma, had mentioned it just last week. Dr. Sharma's husband was a lead researcher there. They were a small, innovative biotech firm developing revolutionary assistive technologies for people with mobility issues. New prosthetic limbs, advanced neural interface software. They were on the verge of a breakthrough. Dr. Sharma had spoken about her husband's work with such passion and hope, about how it could change the lives of millions, including Amara's own mother. Harrison had just casually announced a plan to buy the company, gut its research and development, the very heart of its mission, and strip it for patents. He was going to destroy that hope for profit. In that single, unguarded moment of pride and anger, Harrison Davenport had done more than just confess to a ruthless business tactic. He had handed Amara a weapon. The thread of his grand joke had started to unravel, and now she held that thread in her hand. She could pull it and watch his entire world come undone. She looked from Harrison's smug, angry face to Ethan Cole's concerned one. Ethan, she realized, wasn't just a rival. He was a potential ally. And the game had just become infinitely more dangerous and more important than a simple act of social revenge. The rest of the evening passed in a haze for Amara. She accepted Ethan Cole's business card, the thick linen stock feeling heavy and significant in her palm. She exchanged a few more pleasantries, her mind whirring, processing the implication of what she had overheard. She was polite to the people who approached her, armed with her newfound confidence and the armor of her Halston gown. She answered their questions vaguely, creating an aura of mystery without ever telling a lie. "Where are you from?" someone would ask. "A place with much less interesting architecture," she would reply with a smile. "What do you do?" "I'm currently in a period of transition," she'd say, which was entirely true. Harrison, seething from his encounter with Ethan and unnerved by Amara's transformation, tried to reclaim her. He steered her towards his circle, introducing her with a tone that was a bizarre mix of pride and ownership. "This is Amara," he'd say. "She has a unique perspective on things." But the dynamic was broken. Amara was no longer a prop. She engaged in conversations, her intelligence shining through. When a boorish investor began pontificating about a recent auction of modern art, Amara was able to gently correct his misattribution of a de Kooning painting, citing the specific provenance and exhibition history. The man was left speechless. Harrison watched these interactions with a growing sense of dread and a confusing flicker of admiration. He had intended to mock a sparrow and had instead uncaged a hawk. She made sure to leave the gala early before the night descended into drunken excess. She declined Harrison's offer to share his car, a possessive gesture she knew was meant to cement his victory in the eyes of the other guests. "Thank you, Mr. Davenport, but I have my own arrangements," she said, her tone cool and final. She found George, the driver Maria had hired, and slipped into the back of the town car, leaving Harrison standing alone on the steps of the museum, looking strangely deflated under the bright lights. The next day was Sunday, her day off. She spent the morning in a fever of research. Using the university's online library, she delved into everything she could find about biogenesis. It was just as Dr. Sharma had described, a small, brilliant company focused on people, not profits. Their mission statements were about accessibility and improving quality of life. Their latest project, codenamed Project Theseus, was a neural interface prosthetic that promised unprecedented control and sensory feedback. It was revolutionary. Then she researched Davenport Innovations' acquisition patterns. The picture was grim and predatory. Harrison had a history of buying smaller, innovative companies, firing the research teams, strip mining the intellectual property, and then selling off the remaining assets. He didn't build, he consumed. What he planned for Biogenesis wasn't business. It was vandalism. The weight of the knowledge sat heavily on her. This was no longer about personal pride. Real lives were at stake. The jobs of brilliant researchers like Dr. Sharma's husband. The hope of countless people, like her own mother. On Monday morning, the atmosphere in the penthouse was thick with a new, unspoken tension. When Amara arrived, Harrison was already in the kitchen, pouring himself a coffee. He was dressed in a suit, but his tie was loosened. He looked like he hadn't slept. "Good morning, Amara," he said. The use of her name, without a command attached to it, was jarring. He actually looked at her, his eyes full of a strange mixture of resentment, curiosity, and something else she couldn't quite decipher. "Good morning, Mr. Davenport," she replied, her voice neutral as she began her morning routine. "The gala," he started, then stopped, unsure how to proceed. "You made quite an impression." "It was a memorable evening," she said, her back to him as she loaded the dishwasher. He let out a frustrated sigh. "Look, Amara, the invitation, it was a stupid drunken joke. It was a mistake." Amara paused, then turned to face him. "A mistake, Mr. Davenport, or a miscalculation?" He was taken aback by her directness. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It only became a mistake when I didn't react the way you expected," she said calmly. "If I had shown up crying, or not shown up at all, it would have been a success, wouldn't it? The joke would have landed perfectly." Harrison had no answer. She was right, and her quiet, factual assessment of his character was more damning than any shouting match could have been. A tense silence descended on the penthouse. Amara went about her duties, but the air crackled. He found himself watching her, trying to reconcile the woman polishing his coffee table with the goddess who had captivated his party and verbally eviscerated Isabella Dubois. He was intrigued, he was infuriated, and for the first time in a very long time, he felt something other than boredom. Meanwhile, Isabella was not one to accept defeat gracefully. That afternoon, a call came through from the building's head of security to the penthouse landline. Amara answered, as was part of her job. "This is Daniel from security. I need to speak to Mr. Davenport." His voice was stressed. "Ms. Dubois is in the lobby. She's demanding access to the staff records. She's making accusations about one of your employees." Amara's blood ran cold. Isabella was digging for dirt, trying to find anything she could use to destroy her. A criminal record, a past eviction, a lie on her application. She wanted to find a reason to have Amara fired and disgraced, to put her back in her place. Amara calmly transferred the call to Harrison. She could hear his muffled, angry voice from the office. A few minutes later, he emerged, his face like a thundercloud. "Isabella is a vindictive child," he snarled, more to himself than to Amara. He paced the room for a moment, then stopped and looked at her. "She's accusing you of theft. She claims a diamond earring of hers went missing from the penthouse a few weeks ago." Amara's heart hammered in her chest, but her face remained a calm mask. "That's a lie." "I know it's a lie," he snapped. "Isabella hasn't lost anything more valuable than her dignity. But it's an accusation. It's messy." He stared at her, a strange, calculating look in his eyes. "What do you want, Amara?" "What do you mean?" she asked. "This is a game now, isn't it? You've proven you're smarter than I gave you credit for. You have my attention. So what's your play? You want more money? A different job? You want me to pay for that degree you're studying for?" He gave a wry, humorless smile. "Everyone has a price. I've just realized yours is higher than I thought." It was the ultimate insult, dressed up as a compliment. He still saw her as something to be bought, a problem to be solved with money. He believed he could purchase her compliance, her silence, her forgiveness. He still didn't understand her at all. Before she could answer, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was an email. The sender was Ethan Cole. Subject, following up. "Dear Ms. Jones, it was a true pleasure meeting you on Saturday. Your insights were the highlight of an otherwise predictable evening. The offer for a paid internship with the Cole Arts Initiative stands. We are currently preparing a major exhibition on the influence of Greco-Roman art on Renaissance patrons and would be thrilled to have your research skills on our team. It would provide a generous stipend and full credit towards your master's program. I hope you'll consider it. You are clearly meant for more than your current circumstances. Sincerely, Ethan Cole." She read the email, her mind racing. Here it was, a way out, a real opportunity, offered with respect and admiration for her intellect. She could take it, walk away from Harrison and his toxic world, and never look back. But then she thought of biogenicist. She thought of Dr. Sharma's husband, of her mother, of all the people whose futures Harrison was about to casually destroy for a marginal gain on his stock portfolio. If she walked away now, he would win. He would face no consequences for his cruelty or his greed. She looked up from her phone at Harrison, who was waiting for her answer, an arrogant, impatient look on his face. He expected her to haggle over the price of her silence. She made her decision. This was bigger than a job, bigger than revenge. This was about justice. "I don't want your money, Mr. Davenport," she said, her voice clear and strong. "What I want is for you to call off the acquisition of biogenicist." The arrogance on Harrison's face vanished, replaced by pure, unadulterated shock. It was the last thing on earth he had expected her to say. The shifting sands of their power dynamic had just given way to a chasm, and he was the one on the verge of falling in. "What do you want, Amara?" Harrison demanded, the arrogance returning to his voice. He saw this as a negotiation, a game he always won. "Everyone has a price. I've just realized yours is higher than I thought." He expected her to ask for money, for a new life, for anything he could buy. Instead, she looked at him with an unnerving calm. "I don't want your money, Mr. Davenport," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I want you to call off the acquisition of biogenicist." The demand was so unexpected it struck him silent. He let out a short, incredulous laugh. "You're in my house? Making demands about a nine-figure business deal? You have no idea what you're talking about. Don't I? Amara countered, taking a step forward. At the gala, in your haste to impress your friends, you were careless. You detailed your entire strategy, a hostile bid to acquire Biogen, a plan to gut their research department for patents, and the fact that you're misleading your own board about it. Harrison's face went pale. You're bluffing. You have no proof. My word might not be enough, she conceded. But what if I pass that information along to someone else? A rival, perhaps, who would be very interested in seeing your deal fail. Ethan Cole gave me his card. I imagine a single phone call would be all it takes to ruin your element of surprise and expose your ruthless tactics to the market. Cornered and furious, Harrison fell back on his crudest weapon, status. You try anything, and I'll bury you, he snarled. Isabella's theft accusation will stick. It'll be my word against the help's. Who do you think the police will believe? It was a desperate, ugly threat, but Amara didn't flinch. She had anticipated it. She had the final move. They'll believe the evidence, Mr. Davenport, she said, her voice dropping to an icy whisper. The undeniable evidence from your own security system, the high-definition cameras you have in every room, recording both audio and video. Your entire boastful confession is currently stored on a secure cloud server. It's your move, but the game is already over. It's checkmate. The color drained completely from Harrison's face. His own paranoia, his need to control and monitor his world, had become his undoing. He was exposed, outmaneuvered, and utterly defeated. The power he had wielded his entire life evaporated in an instant. He stumbled back to his desk and sank into the leather chair, all the fight gone from him. He looked like a king whose castle had crumbled to dust around him. Without looking at Amara, he picked up the phone. Get me Robert Miller in Mergers and Acquisitions, he said, his voice a flat, hollow echo of its usual command. There was a pause. Robert, the Biogen deal, it's off. Kill it. He hung up the phone and slumped forward, burying his face in his hands. Amara stood by the window, her heart pounding. She had won. But watching the broken man at the desk, she didn't feel the thrill of victory she'd expected. She only felt the profound, sorrowful weight of justice being served. In the end, there was no grand, cinematic departure. Amara simply finished her shift, collected her things, and walked out of the Davenport penthouse for the last time. She left her uniform neatly folded on the staff room counter. Harrison never emerged from his office. There were no more words to be said. The next day, she sent a simple professional email of resignation to the house manager. Then she called Ethan Cole and accepted his internship offer. Harrison Davenport was a man adrift. The failed Biogen deal, aborted for undisclosed reasons, sent ripples of confusion through his company. His aura of invincibility was cracked. Board members began to ask questions. His rivals, smelling blood, grew bolder. He became more reclusive, the life draining out of his lavish parties. Isabella Dubois, shunned after her pathetic and false accusation, was dismissed, faded from the society pages. Harrison was left with his billions, his penthouse, and a silence that was no longer peaceful, but suffocating. He had learned his lesson in the most brutal way possible, by having his power rendered meaningless. He had everything, and he had nothing. Amara, on the other hand, thrived. The internship at the Cole Arts Initiative was everything she had dreamed of. She was no longer invisible. Her insights were valued, her intelligence celebrated. She worked on the Greco-Roman exhibition, her name appearing in the catalog as a research contributor, a tangible mark of her achievement. Ethan Cole became a mentor and then a friend. Their relationship grew slowly, built on a foundation of mutual respect and admiration, a world away from the toxic dynamics of wealth and power she had escaped. She finished her master's degree with distinction. She never forgot the woman in the sapphire blue dress, the goddess forged in a crucible of humiliation. That woman wasn't a costume she had put on for a night. She was a part of herself that she had finally unlocked. Amara learned that true power isn't about having the world at your feet, but about having the strength to stand on your own. It's not about the wealth you possess, but the worth you possess within yourself. Her story became a quiet legend, a testament to the fact that sometimes the person you underestimate the most is the one who will change everything. The story of Amara Jones is a powerful reminder that dignity is not for sale and that strength can be found in the most unexpected places. It's a story about turning humiliation into triumph and using your voice when others try to silence you. If her journey from an invisible maid to an unbreakable force resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. What did you think of Harrison's joke and Amara's incredible response? Let us know in the comments below. And for more true life stories of justice, empowerment, and incredible transformations, make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Thank you for listening.